thinks that if you sacrifice an individual for some trivial gain in the common good, you will be violating the rights of that individual. This will be spelled out more fully subsequently. So the third step then is, what's a better way of accounting for our duties to humans? And he thinks the best way is to postulate that human beings have inherent value, at least that moral agents have inherent value. So the postulate of inherent value says individual moral agents themselves have a distinctive kind of value independent of their usefulness to others. Now that's just a postulate, a theoretical postulate, and then he's going to see if this postulate does the work needed to account for our moral duties to human beings. This postulate allows us to account for our duties to moral agents, according to Regan, better than any of the competing views, and does so in a way that accords with our reflective, considered moral judgments. So he's working within a kind of Rawlsian reflective equilibrium framework for the philosophical specialists in the audience. Okay. In other words, and for the non-specialists, the basic idea is, how do we test a moral theory? Well, we take a moral theory, and then we look at what the implications of that theory would be, and we test that theory against our most serious, firm moral intuitions. Okay? Any theory, if you come up with a moral theory, and it has the result that it's morally okay to stick pins in babies' eyes and blind them for fun, then you're going to say, hey, that's not a very good theory. That's a bad theory. Because you're going to have a very strong intuition that blinding babies for fun is wrong, and that any theory that yields that result is unacceptable. Okay? And so that's what he's going to try to show, that the rights view, that this postulate of inherent value coupled with the rights view conforms to our strongest held moral intuitions better than any competing theory. Okay. Well, what explains why human moral agents have inherent value? I refer to it as the E-soul criterion of inherent value. This has nothing to do with metaphysical souls or souls in the religious sense. This is an acronym for experiencing subjects of a life. He thinks that human moral agents have inherent value because they're experiencing subjects of a life. What are e-souls? Well, they're subjects of a life that can fare well or ill for them over time. They are beings that have an individual experiential welfare, logically independent of their utility relative to the interests or welfare of others. Which beings are e-souls? Well, presumably conscious, sentient, by that I mean beings capable of feeling pain or experiencing pleasure, conscious, sentient beings whose lives can fare well or ill for them over time. As Regan put it in his talk 2 weeks ago, beings with biographies or histories of lived-through experiences. You have a very good word in German for that notion of experiences. It's not Erfahrung, is it? It's Erleben. What is to lived through experience? Erleben. We don't really have that word in English, but I think it's a very useful conception of experience. So now we'll just sort of sketch out the argument, and then I'll try to fill in some of the details. Just in premise form, the argument goes something like this. Well, all indirect duty views fail. He thinks he's shown that. All direct duty views fail. He thinks he's shown that. Third, we have to postulate inherent value, or postulating that allows us to account for our duties to moral agents, human moral agents, better than any of the competing views, and it does so in a way that accords with our considered reflective moral judgments. The E-soul criterion best explains what it is about human moral agents that gives them inherent value. Fifth, beings, and here's a Kantian idea, beings with inherent value have a right to be treated in ways that respect that value. Kant has this formulation of the categorical imperative that says, always treat persons as ends in themselves and never as a means merely. Persons, moral agents, are deserving of respect and should be treated as an end, not as a mere means. If being an e-soul is what gives human moral agents inherent value, then since many e-souls are not moral agents, for example, infants, severely retarded human beings, and so on, there can be no non-arbitrary reason for denying that moral patients have inherent value. And then we get the conclusion that both moral agents and moral patients, including animals that happen to be e-souls, have rights and equally stringent rights at that. So that's the structure of the argument. Okay. Filling it out a little bit more by way of illustration why he really is critical of the utilitarian approach. Okay. Why is it wrong for us to kill Aunt B and eat her for dinner, even if she is a grouchy, greedy person who would taste great, slow roasted over an open flame? We all probably know someone like Aunt B, maybe a little too close to home. And on a utilitarian perspective, this might be difficult to account for. I mean, if we could really maximize utility, maybe Aunt B has a lot of money she's saved up, and if we knocked her off, we could take that money and build a children's hospital and think of all the good we could do. And everybody would be happier without her. So we can sacrifice this individual for the common good. And then, if she tastes great, that would even be an added benefit. So on utilitarian grounds, it looks like this, in principle, could be justified. Regan's reply is, the reason it would be wrong to do that to Aunt B is that she has inherent value. This is value in and of herself, which is independent of her usefulness to us. Even if killing her and eating her would maximize utility, it would still be wrong because it would fail to respect her inherent value as an individual. Because she has inherent value, she has a moral right to be treated in ways that respect that value. Okay, well, what kinds of rights does she have? Does she have positive rights? Does she have negative rights? Does she have both? Well, positive rights are rights to some benefit, like a right to health care or a right to an education, whereas negative rights are simply rights not to be harmed or not to be interfered with, like the right not to be killed. At least in the United States, the way the terms conservative and liberal are used, liberals tend to think that human beings have both negative rights to non-interference and positive rights to assistance, like welfare or right to an education or something like that. Conservatives tend to think that human beings only have negative rights to non-interference, but no positive rights to assistance. But the interesting thing for our perspective here is that whoever thought liberals and conservatives agreed on anything, they agree that Aunt B has negative rights. Rights not to be interfered with, rights not to be harmed, rights not to be killed. So Regan touched on this in his talk. I'll just briefly review how negative rights are supposed to function. First, they're supposed to function as no trespassing signs. So it's like your body, that's your body. And your negative rights are like little no trespassing signs all over your body saying, hands off. This body is already taken. Don't interfere with this body. Right? So, you looking at me, you might think, oh, poor guy. And he would look so much better with a pierced facial makeover. Right? Or maybe, a well-placed tattoo somewhere on his face. Well, that's not your call. It's my body. You would violate my rights if you just, in the middle of the night, gave me a pierced facial makeover. My little no trespassing signs say, don't interfere, hands off this body, unless I invite you in. Right? That's how no trespassing signs work. He also explained to us this idea of rights functioning like trumps in a card game where there's a trump suit. So we imagine a game where somebody is playing spades, and the ace of spades is the highest card in the deck, and so there are four people playing, and the first person thinks, boy, I've got a really good hand, and plays the queen of spades. Next person plays the king of spades, which beats the queen of spades. The next person thinks, oh, I've got this one, plays the ace of spades. Then we get to the fourth person who has no spades at all, right, but happens to be holding a card in the trump suit. The two of clubs, the lowliest card in the deck. When it's the trump suit, trumps. the ace of spades, the highest card in the deck. And Regan tells us negative rights function like that the rights of the individual trump the common good, right? I look out, I see a bunch of healthy people here, and I think, man, I bet you've got healthy organs. And if I were to kill you and harvest your organs, I could save 5 people. The rights of the individual trump the common good, right? Why would it be wrong for me to kill you and harvest your organs if I could save 5 people? Because, and on a utilitarian theory, this is difficult to account for. But on a rights view, the reason it would be wrong is because I would be violating your right to bodily integrity as well as your right to life. And finally, I don't think Regan